Hi. Thank you very much. And do we have the sound operating? Everything good? Yeah. Thanks. Please sit down. Be comfortable. It's fine. Thank you. Hate to start off telling you that Dr. Thompson doesn't always tell the truth, but since I have to, I just heard him say that I'm going to come and teach the stuff from the Old Testament that he doesn't know anything about. That's not true, because we spent a lot of time talking yesterday and today, and his humility got in the way of the accuracy, I can tell you that. But I feel very, very blessed to be in this house of God and to be a guest of a man who is not only a colleague, not only a friend, but also somebody from whom I have learnt a great deal. And that makes our relationship very, very special indeed. So Dr. Thompson and Pastor Linda, thank you so much for having us here. For the friendship that we share and that we cherish so much. A lot of people notice me because I wear this little thing here. I'd prefer you do not refer to it as a beanie, okay? It'll be fine. You do not have to call it a beanie. It's actually in Hebrew, in the Lord's language, it's called a Yarmulka, which means in Hebrew, fearing God. Got it? Yeah. What's the idea? Well, the idea is that God wants his people to do more than just refrain from bad actions. Because everybody's supposed to refrain from bad actions. But he wants all of us, you and me, to refrain even from bad thoughts. Think of the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet. How does it hurt you if I want your house? I'm not going to steal it. I want your car. I'm not going to steal it. It's just a daydream of mine, that's all. He doesn't want us to do that. Part of the reason is that you end up dissipating energy in those kinds of daydreams. Energies that should go to practically improving your life now get dissipated by the daydream of coveting. And what has this got to do with the beanie? I mean, the yarmulke. That is very simple. It is that the good Lord gave us certain protections not to misuse the senses that he gave us. So, for instance, there are many things that it is better if we do not hear. Right? What good does it do you to hear gossip about somebody you work with? What possible good does it do? So you're going to end up thinking a little less of that person? Why? What's the benefit? All it's done is reduced you. You are a lesser person now because you have to walk around carrying that negative information. Part of your brain cells are now devoted to carrying around for the rest of your life a piece of useless information that makes somebody else's image in your mind less. So what do? Well, God gave us these things at the bottom of our ears, these earlobes. You just pop them up like that. And you close your ears. But wait a moment. You can still hear. Try it, you'll see. Right? You go like that. Oh, no, it does work pretty well. It still has an effect. Because when you do that, you remind yourself that there are things you shouldn't hear. And it even sends a signal to other people. How's about things you shouldn't see? There's plenty of things you shouldn't see, right? Plenty things you shouldn't see, particularly guys. Plenty things that it's not good for us to see. So God gave us eyelids. We can just close our eyes. Now, there are a lot of things we shouldn't say. And that's so dangerous. We can do so much damage with saying the wrong things that we have not one, but two barriers for that: lips and teeth. Keep them both shut. You really get into a lot less trouble from staying silent than from talking. And then that leaves just one last thing, and that is thinking. How do you remind yourself not to think the wrong thoughts? And that's what the Yarmulka is all about. Just a reminder to make sure that what goes on under that is worthy of our Creator. That's the idea. Because the result of thinking wrong things dissipates your energy that should go into improving the quality of your life. And because thinking the wrong things lessens you in whose opinion? Thinking the wrong things lowers an opinion of you in whose mind? Your own. Your own. When you start thinking less of yourself, you're less effective in everything you do. And that doesn't mean that we should all practice self-esteem. Oh, I'm the greatest. I am the greatest. I'm going to have another great day because I'm the greatest. It's complete nonsense. If you believe that, you're stupid. It's complete nonsense. It's part of the self-esteem thing. Nothing is more valueless than self-esteem. One of the very interesting statistics we dug up was that the country whose high school students have the highest self-esteem are here in the United States of America. The country with the lowest math scores here in the United States of America. We're worse than Albania. So what that tells me is that we know the least math, but we feel real good about it. And that's because the educational establishment in most states of the United States practiced and taught the self-esteem idea. You must encourage your children's self-esteem. That's one of the reasons that in many schools around the United States, they now have avoided and eliminated games in which somebody wins and somebody loses, because it might damage somebody's self-esteem. No, self-esteem is a waste of time. Self-respect is very valuable. What's the difference? The difference is self-respect. You know in your heart whether you deserve it or not. Self-respect is the result of an achievement or an accomplishment. Self-respect is because you have disciplined yourself to act in a certain way, and you have a certain self-respect about it that translates into a certain dignity, a certain specialness as a creature touched by the finger of God. Self-esteem means nothing. Self-respect has real value. And so, missing the point on these ideas consigns you to wasting energy and time. And so, let me ask you, how long would it take you to think of three things you could do tomorrow morning that would utterly wreck your lives? Okay, tell me. As soon as you know three things, give me a signal. As soon as you know three things you can do that'll utterly wreck your life. Three things you could take care of tomorrow morning, and by lunchtime or by tomorrow, your life is done. What are some of the three things you could do? Oh, all right. All right. You're right. Just because you put up your hand, that's no reason to call on you, right? I'll call on somebody who didn't put up their hand. That'll show them, right, sir? Okay, tell me some things you could do that would totally wreck your life.
Burn down the house.
You could burn down the house. That's not a total wreck, but it would be a slight hiccup. Yeah, no question about it. Yes, ma'am.
I could
I've got to think about that. What else? So, tell your manager exactly what you think about him. That is not only going to wreck your life, but it'll be fun doing as well. Yeah, now we're getting somewhere. What else can you do to totally wreck your life? Madam in the sweater, yeah? You could go back to drinking and drugs. That's right. Exactly. Turn your back on God. That would be a good start, but if you could shoot somebody after that, now you're getting somewhere. Yeah. Somebody you really don't like. I mean, don't just make it a random thing. You get the idea, right? It's not that hard to come up with 3 things that'll totally ruin your life. It's just not that hard. Now, I want you to think of 3 things that would dramatically transform your life for the good that you could do, or at least start doing tomorrow. One of the differences between these 2 categories is that the things that wreck your life, you'll notice you could get done by lunchtime. The things that'll dramatically improve your life, they may take a little longer, but you can maybe only get them started tomorrow morning. But now we want 3 things that would dramatically improve your life. And it's a lot harder to think of these. But somebody is ready. Yes. I'm sorry? Start a diet? Yes. I hope that wasn't personal or anything. Because I'll be the first to admit that the Lapin family does not have a malnutrition problem. And that's partially because of the hospitality of the Thompsons, I want to tell you. Because Susan and I thought they were coming to Tinley Park, right? The nearest kosher food is like 60 miles away from here. So we thought, this would be like an enforced diet. We'll come here, we'll go home 10 pounds lighter. This can only be good. Like you say, it's a start on a new life, right? Well, thanks, Pastor, but you wrecked that idea. So yeah, that's a really good one. What else? Give me something else that, and I know, look, this is harder to think of. There's no question about it. But some of the things you can do that dramatically improve your life, you can start doing them tomorrow.
Get up, write your goals for the things you want to accomplish.
Get up in a purposeful kind of way, write your goals. Sir, with the cap.
3 things. 1, start reading the right books. 2, start pursuing people that are where you want to be. 3, really listen to them and don't just pretend you listen.
I didn't say you should come here prepared tonight.
Sorry, I took a nap before I got here. I got saved in 1979, and an old gentleman taught me to have a God and I time. First thing in the morning, spend time with God in prayer, building that relationship. That'll change my life.
No question about it. Yes.
Apply for jobs if you don't have them.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, get a job. Absolutely. And if you have one, get a raise. Get a better job. Absolutely. I'm going to focus on one thing that everybody can start doing. And I think you'll all agree that this would unquestionably improve your lives. It would improve my life for sure. I can't imagine that it wouldn't improve your lives. And then we'll have to understand that that connects very much with God and his plans for all his children. The one thing that we can all start doing tomorrow is making more money. Now, I understand why nobody said that. And that is because on some deep subconscious level inside each and every one of you, you felt that saying that was unseemly. That saying would sort of make you sound unspiritual, ungodly, make you sound greedy, selfish. But nobody really felt comfortable saying the one most obvious thing. All of the things you said were all true. And the lady who said get a job was closest to this, obviously. But absolutely straightforward and direct. Starting tomorrow morning, seriously committed to a program of making more money. The result of that, because there's another 2 months or nearly 2 months left in 2016, the result is that if you use the rest of 2016, the next 6 weeks of planning and strategizing and getting into the groove, starting the program, by the time January the 1st kicks in, you don't have to waste time making New Year's resolutions. You don't have to waste time throwing a party. You're already on the program, and 2017 is dramatically more remunerative than 2016. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. And my prayer is that each and every one of you should need a new excellent tax accountant for next year. You should all have a tax problem for next year. That would be a good thing. The question is getting from here to there. Now, my wife and I used to live on a beautiful island, not too far from Seattle. Beautiful island. And we actually, as it turned out, we lived right in the middle of the island. But you know what I really would have liked? I would have liked to have sold that house and bought a house on the circumference of the island. Because there are only 200 houses right on the water. But I would have liked that. I would have liked to have been able to park my boat right at the end of my front yard. I'd have liked to be able to step out of my house in the morning and just look out at the great big lake out there. So I'd have liked a house on the water. Trouble is, there are only 200 houses on the water. And I want to explore with you how a country or a society or a nation might decide to divvy up those 200 houses. Now, this was in the state of Washington. And in our county, there were about 2 million people. So I can assume how many of those 2 million people would have liked a waterfront property. Let's assume 100%, shall we? I think that would be a safe, I mean, who wouldn't? So there's 2 million people who want 200 houses. A little bit of arithmetic here. That means there are how many people who want every single house? people. 2 million people. There's 200 houses. There's 2 million people who want their houses. There are only 200 houses. So how many people want each house? 10,000 people for each house. Is that right, Susan? You let me know if I made a mistake on that. Now, how do we divide it up? What are the ways we have for dividing it up? Well, here is one way. Now, I'm only aware of 5 different ways. And if any of you know of a 6th way, you should please tell me, because that way I won't look like an idiot next time I make this point. But the first way I'm aware of is we throw a lottery. We prepare 2 million pieces of paper. On 200 of them, we put a house address, one for each of the 200 houses on the water. And on all the others, we write the word loser. And we put all the papers in a big hat, and we get all the 2 million residents of King County, Washington, to file by in a long line. Everybody puts their hand in the hat, pulls out a piece of paper, and the 200 who end up with an address go to their new house. That'd be one way to do it. And it's not that ridiculous, because state governments around the country, and I don't know if Illinois does it, but state governments around the country do lotteries. So obviously they're not opposed to the idea of a lottery. So they could distribute valuable real estate by lottery. That's one way. Another way is to set up a bureaucracy, a government agency. And we can put all kinds of politicians in there and professors, and make a big committee, and then those people will have the job of allocating the 200 homes. Now, there are lots of places like the old Soviet Union used to distribute valuable real estate that way. Communist China distributes real estate that way. Cuba distributes real estate that way. And the only drawback is that if you want to get one of those houses, you kind of really need to be a good friend of one of the bureaucrats on the committee. But obviously, there are many places in the world where this works, so we shouldn't just rule it out. That's the second way. The third way is we use force. Basically, I look around the room, I find 20 of the biggest guys, and I say to them, listen, you guys, come help me throw the people out of the house. I've picked the house I want. We throw the people out of there, and I move in. And because I wouldn't want anybody with 10 even bigger guys to throw me out, I have to keep you guys on retainer, and you've got to patrol my yard with effective firepower to make sure that nobody else tries what we just successfully did. And you could laugh at this, but there are, again, many parts of the world today, in Africa, in parts of Arabia, parts of Asia, where real estate transitions in exactly this fashion. Fourth way. The fourth way is to say, you know what? It belongs to everybody. It's not right that only 200 people should have it. It should belong to all 2 million people. How do you do that? We go there and we knock down all the 200 houses. We turn them into a big ring park. And we declare it a public park open to the public. Problem solved, right? Not really. All we've done is postpone the problem of how do we distribute the next row of houses in that are even better, because they've not only got waterfront, they've got a park. And then we're back to methods 1 through 3. That's the fourth system. The fifth one is we allow everybody to bid how much of their life energy they are willing to give. What do I mean by life energy? Your money. How important is it to you to live in a waterfront house? Obviously, to Susan and me, it obviously wasn't that important because we chose to spend our money on other things. But maybe there's some people for whom it's the most important thing, and they are willing to. That's another way. And I agree, it also seems a little tough because not everybody has the wherewithal to go ahead and get that house. But those are the only 5 ways of doing it. I can't think of a 6th way. And so now, it's not a case of what's the best way you can think of, because nobody's able to come up with another way. It's which of these ways should a society choose? Or the way you and I might prefer to phrase the question, which of these ways would God be least angry with? Which of these ways might God be smiling on? That's the question we have to ask ourselves. How would God feel about the idea of taking the house with a little miniature army by force? Probably not so good. Lottery? Probably not so good. Bureaucratic assignment with all the corruption that involves? Probably not so good. Nobody getting it? That's not a moral solution. Is it possible that God smiles on financial transactions? Is that possible? Well, according to ancient Jewish wisdom and the principles of the Bible, God smiles on monetary transactions. Because we all try and secure things we need and cooperation from other people. And by and large, it turns out that there are two ways to do that. One is with a gun, and the other is with money. And I would rather do it with the power of money. But what about folks who don't have? True. The answer to that we have to begin to explore is what happens to the fellow, and this is a very nice guy, by the way. Nice, the nicest guy. You couldn't imagine a nicer guy. Regular at church, charitable, nice to his wife and his family. He goes up to the restaurant on the top floor of a 20-floor building, and he opens the window wide, and he starts climbing out. Everybody says, "Hey, what are you doing? You're 20 floors off the pavement." He says, "I am a saint. I'm a really virtuous person. There is no way that God would let me hurt myself. You have nothing to worry about." And people say, "Please don't do this. This is really not a good idea." He says, "You don't understand. I'm not a sinner. I'm a really good guy. There's no way that a loving God would let anything bad happen to me." And you're all smiling because you know how ridiculous this is. And he climbs out of the window and launches himself into space. And he has a really exciting 3 seconds until he hits the sidewalk at about 50 miles an hour. And that part isn't so fun. And he arrives in heaven, and God shakes his head. "You are a fool. What were you thinking?" He says, "What was I thinking, Lord? What were you thinking? I've loved you all my life. I've worshipped you. I've followed your commandments. And look what you did." He says, "What I did? No. I set up a world with very clear rules. And part of your obligation, that's why I gave you a Bible, part of your obligation is to study how the world really works. You're supposed to know about gravity. I don't care how saintly you are. You still neglected one of your responsibilities, which was figuring out that gravity is real. It's not hard. Now do you understand why there are many very, very good and wonderful people who suffer in poverty? They are good and lovely and wonderful people. They have simply failed to study the principles that God put in place. God put physical laws in place, such as gravity, such as ensuring that if you step out of a window on the 20th floor, you are going to have a very rough landing. That's a rule. But he also set in place spiritual laws. And the spiritual laws have to do with family life, right? Do you want to have a fulfilling life? Then you need to have a really good marriage and you need to raise terrific kids. And the truth is, and this is a biblical principle, that if your finances are in good shape and your family is in good shape, what complaints do you have in life? Can you think of a single complaint? If everything is good with your family and your marriage and everything is good with your finances, you should be on your knees 3 times a day thanking the Lord for the life you have. And that was the plan, the principle that God set up. There's marriage, sex is a part of it, and how and why that works, and money is another part of it. And very often, we study selectively. We choose the things we want to study, and we neglect a very important part. As I said earlier, Pastor Rob and Pastor Linda have been so very good to us in terms of making sure that although we follow the Old Testament dietary laws, and there's not a lot of kosher food nearby here, they've gone to a lot of trouble, and the people who work with them have gone to a lot of trouble to make sure, right, that we do have food. Food is a part of the appetites that God built into us. And there are rules about that as well. And there are lots and lots of laws. In the 5 books of Moses, lots of laws about kosher food. What we can eat, what we can't eat, what can be mixed. Thou shalt not cook a goat in its mother's milk. If that was what it meant literally, that would be really convenient, because by now I'd be enjoying cheeseburgers. But I'm not allowed to eat cheeseburgers, because Jews are instructed that that phrase, you shalt not cook a goat in its mother's milk, which is repeated not once but twice, 3 times, is in order to explain that we're not allowed to mix any dairy food with any meat food in the same meal. So I've never had a cheeseburger. And it worries me, because 90 million McDonald's customers can't be wrong. But it's what the boss says, right? I have no choice. That's an instruction to me. I have to follow that. There are a lot of rules in the 5 books of Moses about kosher food, but there's 20 times more rules about money. It's clearly a part of God's plan, because he doesn't want us taking property from one another with a gun. And he doesn't want us depending on a lottery and gambling. And he doesn't want us to hand over power in our lives to bureaucrats and governments. He wants each and every one of us to have independence. Do you know how you have independence? With a few dollars in the bank. It's all part of the plan. Now, you want to step out of a 20th floor window and rely on the fact that other things in your life are virtuous and pure? Doesn't really work that way. The other things in our lives do need to be virtuous and pure. That's right. But we also are supposed to learn all the principles that God gave us so as we understand how the world really works. And money is an absolutely vital and indispensable part of how the world really works. But these are things that we all have to do. Now, I knew exactly how much time I have with you this evening in this session, and I know exactly how much time I have with you this evening in the next session a little bit later. And I know that in this time period, I cannot give you all the information that enables you to pick up out of here, walk out, and immediately start implementing the thing. Even if you took notes frantically on everything I said, there isn't enough time for me to get to everything. Now, for many of you, nothing is going to change. It's not that I know you all, I don't. And I think the percentage of you who are going to change your lives, I think, is high because of where we're meeting. In this particular congregation and in this particular community, I sense that the caliber of people is incredibly high, because a church is very often a reflection of its leadership. And so I think a lot of you are going to take the steps to change your financial destiny, knowing that it is precisely what God wants you to do. And I want to just clarify, it's something I explained twice yesterday. Does God want you to be rich? No, I'm not aware of that. And if you are, you've got to come tell me later on how you know. I'd love to know. Because he speaks to me about many things, but he's never once said, Lapin, I want you to be rich. But I'll tell you what he has said. And he said it to me and he said it to you. He said it's not good for man to be alone. And that's not just about marriage. That means he wants each and every one of us to build relationships and to be attached and to serve all his other children. That's a really important part of it. He wants every one of us to serve his other children. I tell a story of my first car. I just really love automobiles. I love cars. I mean, the whole idea of freedom of transport. And I mean, do you have any idea of what I think of public transport? I love cars. And my very first one, I was a teenager, and I used up all my money to get it. And as soon as I'd got it, like a week later, it started making a horrible, horrible noise. And so I told my father, who was a very famous, distinguished rabbi, and I said to him, I've got a real problem. He says, you know what? There's a man called Mr. Goldberg who has an auto repair shop downtown. Go down there. You know, tell him I told you to come there. He's a friend of mine. He's a member of my congregation. Talk to him. So I go down and I pull into the shop, and Mr. Goldberg comes out and he says, what's up? And I said, well, Rabbi Lapin is my dad. And he said I should come here. He says, start up the car, pop the lid. He puts his head inside the hood, and he fiddles with the accelerator connection. I hear the car, but meanwhile it's rattling as if there's stones flying around in the cylinders. It's bad news. And he comes back to me, and he like, that's the worst sound you ever want to hear from your mechanic. And I said, what's up, what's up? And he said, listen, sit down. I'm going to take it around the back. I'm going to see what I can do. And like, that was the longest hour and a half of my life. I just sat there and sat there and sat there. It seemed like a week. Pretty soon he brings the car back, and I can't hear the motor running. It sounds like a sewing machine. It's amazing. And he comes out the car, and he gives me the keys, and he says, there you go, son, off you go. So I said, with considerable trepidation, because I'd used up pretty much all the money I'd saved on buying the car, I said, Mr. Goldberg, how much do I owe you? And he said, nothing. That's fine. It's a pleasure. You're on your way. So I thank him very much. I start pulling out of the shop, and before I even get out of the driveway and I'm in the road, it suddenly occurs to me a really bad thing. He thought it's my father's car. That's why, if he'd have known it was mine, then he would have charged me. He thought I was just bringing it in, like maybe the way I said, my father told me to come here. He thought it meant I was bringing his car. So sadly, I thought, you know what, I can't start off my car career with a lie. I got to go back. I go back. He says, what's the matter? Is there a problem? And I said, look, I'm really sorry. I just got to tell you, this car it's not my dad's, it's actually mine. He says, I knew that. So I said, well, I don't understand. You did me a big favor. I don't understand why you didn't charge me. He says, let me tell you something, son. About 12 years ago, your father did a favor for me that I'll never be able to repay him for. I said, I still don't get it. He said, I know, because you're only 17. But when you have a child of your own, you will discover that even better than doing something for a man is doing something for his kid. Because I assure you, nothing will give your father greater pleasure than to know that I fixed your car as a favor. And anyone with children knows that's true. And if that's how we feel, imagine how our Father in heaven feels when we take care of one another, when we do things for one another. That's the idea. And you know what money is? It's God's way of encouraging us to do things for one another, to serve one another. Because no, God doesn't want us to be rich. He wants us to be obsessively preoccupied with the needs and the desires of all his other children. Why would it surprise us that a good and loving God would reward us with the incredible blessing of financial abundance when we take care of his other kids? And so when we get a little further on this evening, you're going to see how we implement that principle. Because as long as you chase money, it'll always elude you. As long as you chase opportunities to help other people, the money will always flow. Now that just sounds like a nice little sentiment. What I still have to show you is that that is a practical strategy for changing your financial destiny. But I can't possibly give you all the principles of ancient Jewish wisdom in the time we have this evening. And so for that reason, Susan and I have prepared what we call an income abundance set. This isn't going to be for everybody here. But for some of you, for those of you who are sufficiently inspired to tomorrow morning really decide that first thing in the morning, you are going to start transforming your finances in accordance with biblical vision of abundance, then you're going to want those. And when I say not everybody, I will wrap up this session by explaining the following. Beginning of the book of Exodus, chapter 3. Listen to the sentence. And the angel of God appeared in a burning bush and said, Moses. And Moses said, yes, that's me. What do you want? And the angel said, well, your people are in Egypt, etc., etc. You all know that, right? Yes. Well, that's pretty amazing because it doesn't exist. I lied. I left out a whole section. I left out an entire verse. Here's how it really reads. An angel of God appeared in a burning bush. And Moses saw it. And he turned aside. And he said, what's going on? I've never seen this before. I've never seen a bush that burns and doesn't get consumed. And the angel of God spoke to him and said, Moses, and he said, yep, I'm here. See what I left out? That Moses stopped what he was doing, turned aside, changed the entire trajectory of his life to go and see something that didn't make sense. Are we all willing to recognize that our lives don't make sense the way we're running them? That they are not what they could be? That we are not fulfilling our destiny? You know, God doesn't expect you and me to be Moses. He expects us to be who we really could be. But do we turn aside? Well, you have to ask yourself. Do you remember when God spoke to Noah and said, Noah, I can't stand the way people are doing. I'm going to bring it all to an end. I want you to build an ark. I know you're 600 years old, but there's nothing like a nice home construction project to keep you young. Part of that I modified, but that's basically the story. When that happened, why didn't Noah say, whoa, who, me, why? No. You know why? Because a few verses earlier, we've already read that Noah found favor in God's eyes. We know why God spoke to Noah. But 10 generations later, we're in chapter 12, and now, out of the blue, it says, and God spoke to Abraham and said, Lech lecha. Start walking. Go. Start moving. Stop what you're doing. Change your whole life. Why did God say that to Abraham? Have you ever wondered that? It's not like Noah, where we met Noah beforehand and we knew that Noah found favor in God's eyes and everything was good. In this case, like out of the blue, you know nothing about Abraham. All of a sudden, God spoke and Abraham starts walking. What's that all about? You know what the answer is? Same as the situation with Moses. God actually said that to everybody. Start changing your life. Start walking. Start moving. Do something different. Go in the direction which I will show you. Everybody ignored it except Abraham. That's why it is. Because otherwise, if it was like focused at Abraham, you should say to yourself, well, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. Because Abraham should say, whoa, who's that? Why me? No, that message went from God to everybody. None of you are living your potential. Change it from now. Abraham listened. Not everybody listens. Not everybody, even if they do listen, not everybody can overcome the inertia of their lives to change direction. But some people can. It's going to be a higher percentage here than it is in many other places that I speak at. I speak in places that are not churches, and I know already it's going to be about 20% of the people there are going to actually do it. In churches, it's usually higher. In outstanding churches, it's much higher. But it's not going to be everybody. So for those of you who are interested in seriously taking that further, please see Susan and myself over at our table a little later on. You also, if you prefer, you can also go to the website, which is a website that you don't have to write down, because once I've told it to you, you will never forget it. And the website is youneedarabbi.com. All you got to remember is rabbi has 2 B's. It's easy. youneedarabbi.com, and you can do it that way as well. But yes, I'm being perfectly candid with you. There is a lot of information, much more than I can give you in an hour or 2 or 3. There's a lot of information. All I can do is let you know that there is a pathway. There is a roadmap. And it is a roadmap that Jews have used for centuries. Jews of every size and every shape and every gender and every color. Jews in every country, that countries of good countries and bad countries, oppressive regimes and hospitable places. Jews have used these principles. Jews have walked this pathway to prosperity in a way that has brought them disproportionate financial success. Everybody knows that, right? But don't you dare say it, because if you say it, it's anti-Semitic bigotry to say Jews are good with money. If I say it, I'm circumcised, so it's okay with me. So it's really the only time, isn't it, in the history of all of academia that removing a piece of skin converts bigotry to research. So, and so this is now research that Jews are disproportionately good with money. How and why? Principles from the Bible. And that's where we'll pick up just a little bit later this evening. God bless.